All right, let's dive into freshwater systems. Rivers, lakes, and wetlands. Oh my. It's all about where our water comes from. And, you send over some really interesting stuff about global water resources and the problems with pollution and like what we could do to protect all this. I think this will be a good deep dive.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's easy to forget about where our water comes from, but once you start looking at how much fresh water we actually have, it's kind of a wake-up call.
Right. Like we all know Earth is mostly water, but I was reading through the stuff you sent and it said only like 2.5% of that is actually fresh water. That's like nothing.
Yeah, and most of that fresh water is stuck in glaciers and ice caps. So what we can actually use is even smaller.
Wow. That's crazy to think about. I mean, we use water for everything. Drinking, showering, watering plants, making our food.
Exactly. And the more people there are, the more demand there is for fresh water.
Yeah.
Plus, we've got industries and agriculture that need water, too. It's all connected.
Yeah, it's like everyone's fighting over this tiny little puddle. And not only that, we're also polluting it. Some of the stuff you sent about pollution was kind of scary.
No, yeah, you're right. Pollution from industries and farms and like sewage that isn't treated is a huge problem for fresh water everywhere.
The stuff about industrial waste really freaked me out. Heavy metals getting into the water, mercury and lead. That's seriously bad news.
It really is. It hurts the fish and other animals that live in the water, but it also gets into our drinking water and can make people sick. Like lead can really mess up kids' development, even if they're only exposed to a little bit.
It's scary stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's all the runoff from farms, with fertilizers and pesticides ending up in rivers and lakes.
Yeah, that causes all sorts of problems. You get too many nutrients from the fertilizers, which causes this thing called eutrophication. It's basically like algae go wild and use up all the oxygen in the water. Then you end up with these dead zones where nothing can live.
It's kind of like we're suffocating the water. Oh, and speaking of suffocating, I can't forget about all the plastic. That's a problem in freshwater too, right? It's not just the oceans.
Definitely not. Rivers and lakes are getting clogged with plastic too. A lot of it comes from cities where they don't have good ways to deal with trash. Remember that thing about all the people living in slums? Over 1 billion.
Yeah, it's really sad. It shows how connected all this stuff is, right? Like the environment and social justice are all tied together.
Yeah, for sure. Those communities get hit the hardest by pollution, but they don't have the resources to fix it. It makes you think that we need solutions that help everyone and give these communities more power to protect their own water.
Absolutely. It feels like we're talking about all these huge, scary problems.
Yeah.
Is there any good news? Like, are there any success stories about protecting fresh water?
Definitely. There are some amazing conservation projects happening all over the world, like sustainable fishing and wetland restoration.
I'm really interested in those success stories.
Yeah.
For example, you mentioned something about Iceland doing sustainable fishing with something called individual transferable quotas. How does that even work?
Oh, yeah, actually pretty cool. They figure out how much fish they can catch without hurting the populations, and then they divide that amount up into quotas for each fisherman. And the cool part is they can trade these quotas. So it creates this incentive to fish sustainably.
Well, that's smart. So if you own a part of the fishery, you want to make sure it stays healthy so you can keep fishing.
Exactly. It's been working really well in Iceland to prevent overfishing. The fish populations are doing a lot better because of it.
That's so encouraging. And what about wetland restoration? You mentioned that as another good thing happening.
Yeah, wetlands are super important. They're like these natural filters for water, and they're home to tons of different plants and animals. And the cool thing is they can bounce back pretty well if you give them a chance.
So restoring wetlands means cleaner water, more plants and animals, basically a healthier environment overall, right?
Yeah, exactly. There are all these great examples around the world where restoring wetlands has made the water cleaner and brought back all sorts of plants and animals that had disappeared.
That gives me hope. Even with all these problems, we can still make a difference.
Yeah, for sure. And these efforts are happening everywhere, Governments are doing big projects, but there are also communities doing amazing work on a smaller scale.
Speaking of communities, you mentioned that they play a big role in all of this. What are some examples of how communities are managing their own water?
Well, in a lot of places around the world, communities have been managing their water for generations, often using their traditional knowledge. And now people are starting to recognize how valuable those practices are, and they're being used in modern water management.
So it's about combining science with the wisdom of people who have lived in these places for a long time.
Exactly. And it's about giving communities more control over their own water, letting them make decisions and make sure that the solutions actually work for their specific needs.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just about rules from the top down. It's about everyone feeling responsible and working together.
Yeah, exactly. When communities are involved in protecting their water, they care more about making it last.
It really shows how everything's connected. Global stuff, local stuff, all our choices about water, they all have a ripple effect.
Yeah, they totally do. Those ripples go beyond just the environment, too. Water is connected to our economy and how well our society functions.
I'd love to hear more about that. How does water management tie into economics and society as a whole?
Well, think about it. We need clean water for almost everything. Growing food, making things in factories, generating power, even tourism.
So if there's not enough water or it's too polluted to use, that would affect everything, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It could mess up whole industries, cause people to lose their jobs, and even lead to social unrest. It's a big deal.
Okay, I see what you mean. It's about way more than just protecting nature. It's about protecting ourselves and making sure everyone has a good life.
Exactly. And to understand all of this, we need to think about climate change, too.
Oh, right, of course. It seems like climate change is connected to everything these days, and I'm sure water is no exception.
Yeah, you're right. Climate change is already changing the way rain falls, leading to more droughts in some areas and way more rain and flooding in others.
So it's like too little water in some places, too much in others, all because of climate change.
Exactly. And those changes are making things even harder for freshwater systems. It impacts everything from how we grow our food to the water we drink.
It's a lot to think about. But I'm glad we're talking about it, If we're going to solve these problems, we need to understand how they're all connected.
Absolutely. The good news is that people are working on lots of cool solutions, like new technologies and better ways to manage water.
I'm curious to hear more about that. What are some of the things that are giving you hope?
Well, for one thing, water treatment technology is getting really advanced. They're coming up with ways to remove even the toughest pollutants.
That's great. Anything else on the horizon?
People are getting really interested in something called nature-based solutions. It's basically about working with nature to manage water instead of trying to control it all the time.
Can you give me an example of what that looks like?
Sure. Think about wetlands. They act like giant sponges, soaking up extra water during floods and slowly releasing it when things are dry.
So instead of building more dams and concrete channels, we can let nature do its thing and create water systems that are more resilient.
Exactly. And it's not just about managing water. Wetlands are also great for wildlife, clean air, and recreation. It's a win-win for people and the planet.
I love that. It seems like we're finally starting to realize that we're part of nature, not separate from it.
Yeah, that's a really important shift in how we think. And it's not just about our relationship with nature, it's also about how we manage water as a society.
Okay, you're talking about policy stuff now, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about what good water governance looks like?
Well, the first thing is to understand that water doesn't care about borders, right?
Right. Rivers flow across countries, and underground water sources go under borders.
Exactly. So we need countries to work together, have clear laws, and make decisions in a way that everyone can see and understand.
And that includes everyone, right? Governments, industries, local communities, indigenous people.
Yeah, everyone. Good water governance means listening to everybody and making sure everyone has a say in how we use and protect this precious resource.
So it's more than just rules and regulations. It's about creating a sense of shared responsibility.
Yeah, that's the key. And it brings us back to you, the listener.
Oh, I love when we loop back to the listener. It reminds us that this isn't just an abstract conversation. It's about real people making real choices every day.
Think about it. Every drop of water you use, every decision you make about what you buy and how much you waste, it all affects these freshwater systems.
It's like that ripple effect again, spreading out from our individual actions to the entire world.
Exactly. So what kind of ripple do you want to create?
That is a great question. And it's one we'll keep exploring as we dive deeper into the fascinating world of freshwater systems.
It's wild, right? Water is something we literally use every day, but it's so complicated and tied to, everything else.
Totally. It's easy to forget about the bigger picture when you're just thinking about, taking a shower or watering your plants. But you've really helped me see how much more there is to it.
And we're just getting started. There's so much more to unpack when it comes to freshwater systems and the challenges and, the good stuff too.
Well, I'm ready to dive in. What else should we be thinking about?
One thing that people don't always think about is how much water is worth economically. We kind of take it for granted like it's free, but it's actually a huge part of different industries and whole economies.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that would be important. Can you give me some examples?
Sure. Think about agriculture. That's the biggest user of fresh water worldwide. All the food we eat relies on having enough water for irrigation. And then there's industry. Manufacturing needs a ton of water for cooling, cleaning, and even as an ingredient in some products. And, oh, of course, we can't forget about energy. Hydroelectric power is completely dependent on water.
Right, right. So if water starts to become scarce or it gets too polluted to use, it would have a huge impact on the economy.
Absolutely. We could see problems with food supply, the cost of making things would go up, we might even have energy shortages. It's a big reminder that water is worth a lot more than what we pay for it on our water bills.
And it's not just about money either, right? Water management also has, like, social and political impacts.
Totally. When there's not enough water, it can make existing inequalities worse. People end up fighting over who gets access to water. And in some parts of the world, water scarcity is already contributing to unrest and political instability.
It's like that saying, water is life, but no water conflict, or something like that.
It's a tough reality, and it's something we really need to think about as climate change makes these problems even worse.
Speaking of climate change, how are rising temperatures and all those weird weather patterns affecting freshwater systems?
Well, we're already seeing big changes in rainfall patterns. Some places are experiencing more intense droughts, while others are dealing with way more rain and flooding. These shifts can mess up water supplies, damage infrastructure, and even increase the risk of getting sick from waterborne diseases.
And it's not just about the amount of water either, right? Climate change messes with water quality too.
Yeah, you're right. Warmer water holds less dissolved oxygen, which makes it harder for fish and other aquatic life to survive. Plus, warmer water can create the perfect conditions for harmful algal blooms, which can contaminate drinking water sources.
So climate change is basically making all the existing problems with freshwater even worse.
Pretty much, yeah. And it's important to remember that these impacts aren't felt equally everywhere. Vulnerable communities, especially those without a lot of resources, are going to be hit the hardest by these changes.
It's a reminder that we need solutions that are fair and just, making sure everyone has access to safe, affordable water, no matter who they are or where they live.
Absolutely. It's a global challenge that needs cooperation, innovation, and a serious commitment to sustainability.
So we've talked about the problems, but are there any solutions? Is there anything that gives you hope?
Of course, there's so much amazing work happening in the field of water technology. We're seeing huge advancements in water treatment and desalination, which can help make clean water available in places where it's scarce.
That's good to hear. What else is happening on the technology front?
Well, we're also seeing innovations in irrigation systems that use water more efficiently, and smart water meters that can help us conserve water and reduce waste.
I've heard about those smart meters.
Yeah?
They can, detect leaks and tell you how much water you're using in real time.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about using technology to help people make smarter decisions about their water use.
And it's not just about technology either, right? You mentioned nature-based solutions earlier. Can you tell me more about those?
Yeah, definitely. There's this growing understanding that working with nature instead of fighting against it can be a super effective way to manage water. Like restoring wetlands and floodplains can help reduce the impacts of flooding, and they have a bunch of other benefits too, like creating habitats for wildlife and cleaning the water.
So it's about looking at these ecosystems as partners, not just resources to be exploited.
Exactly. And this way of thinking is expanding beyond wetlands. There's more and more interest in green infrastructure, things like rain gardens and permeable pavements, to manage stormwater runoff in cities.
That makes sense. Instead of just trying to get rid of rainwater as quickly as possible, we can design our cities so that water can soak into the ground and replenish aquifers.
Right on. It's all about having a more integrated approach to water management, understanding that every drop is valuable and we need to use it wisely.
It's like we're shifting from this scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset, recognizing that nature can provide for us if we treat it with respect.
I like that way of putting it. And this shifting perspective is showing up in how we think about data and information in water management too.
Data, how does that fit into the picture?
Well, in the past, decisions about water management were often based on limited information and outdated models. But now, with all the advancements in remote sensing, satellite imagery, and data analytics, we have access to a ton of information about water resources, like more than ever before.
So we can track how much water there is, monitor water quality, and even predict droughts and floods with more accuracy.
Exactly. And this data isn't just useful for scientists and policymakers. It can also be used to empower communities to make more informed decisions about their water use and to hold decision makers accountable.
That's really cool. It sounds like we're moving toward a more transparent and participatory approach to water management, where everyone has a role to play.
That's definitely the goal. And it's not just about sharing information, it's about creating a culture where everyone understands the value of water and is committed to protecting it for future generations.
Speaking of future generations, this whole conversation has made me think about what we owe to those who come after us when it comes to water.
That's such an important question. We need to make sure that we're not just meeting our own needs, but also making sure that future generations will have access to the same quality and quantity of water that we have today.
I've heard the term water footprint used to describe the impact our consumption patterns have on water resources. Can you explain what that means?
Sure, your water footprint includes all the water you use directly, like for drinking and showering, but it also includes all the water that's used to produce the things you buy and use. So like the water it takes to grow your food, make your clothes, and produce the energy you use.
So even if I'm being careful about how much water I use at home, my choices as a consumer still have a big impact on global water resources.
You got it. And that's why it's so important to be aware of your water footprint and make choices that are more sustainable.
I think it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this. Like the problem seems so big, it's hard to know where to even start.
I get it. But the truth is, every little thing you do can make a difference. Even small actions add up.
Okay, so what are some easy things people can do in their everyday lives to reduce their water footprint?
Well, you can start by being more mindful of your water use at home. Take shorter showers, fix any leaks you find, and choose appliances that are water efficient. Little things like that can make a big difference.
Those are all good tips. What else?
Think about your diet, too. Eating less meat, especially beef, can have a huge impact. Animal agriculture uses a ton of water.
Yeah, I've heard it takes like thousands of liters of water to produce just 1 kilogram of beef. It's crazy.
I know, right? And another thing you can do is support businesses and organizations that are working to make water use more sustainable.
Right. Choosing to buy from companies that care about water sends a message that we want them to do better.
Totally. And don't underestimate the power of talking about these issues. Tell your friends and family, share information online, and contact your elected officials. Raising awareness and speaking up can really make a difference.
It's all about remembering that we're all in this together. We need everyone to work together to solve these water problems.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that brings us to something we touched on earlier, the need for effective water governance.
Yeah, we talked about it a bit before, but I'm ready to dive in a little deeper. What does good water governance actually look like?
It's all about creating a system that guarantees everyone access to water, protects water quality, and makes sure we're using water in a sustainable way. This means having clear laws about water rights, regulations to protect water quality, and promoting collaboration between different groups.
So it's not just about having laws in place, it's about making sure they're actually being enforced and that everyone has a say in how decisions are made.
You got it. And it's also about understanding that water management isn't just a technical problem, it's a social and political one too. We need to address power imbalances, be transparent, and make sure that marginalized communities are heard.
It sounds like a huge challenge, but it's really inspiring to hear about all the people and organizations working toward these goals.
It really is. There are amazing examples all over the world of communities coming together to find creative and sustainable solutions to water problems.
This has been an incredible conversation. I feel like I've learned so much about how important fresh water is and all the ways it connects to our lives and the health of the planet.
Me too. And there's still so much more to learn and explore.
I'm excited to keep learning. What other aspects of freshwater systems should we be thinking about? I'm really interested in this idea of looking at freshwater from a bigger perspective. Like you said, water doesn't care about borders, so how do we even manage water when different countries are involved?
Oh, that's a huge challenge for sure. Rivers can flow through multiple countries, and those underground aquifers, they don't stop at borders either. So yeah, countries have to work together to make sure everyone gets their fair share of water and to prevent conflicts.
I bet that's tough, especially when water is already scarce in some regions.
You're absolutely right. There's been a history of water disputes causing tension and even, wars. That's why having these international water treaties and agreements is so important.
Can you think of any examples of international water agreements that have actually worked?
Oh, yeah, there's a famous one, the Indus Waters Treaty. It's between India and Pakistan.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, it was signed back in 1960. Basically, it divides up the water from the Indus River and its tributaries between the two countries, and it's really helped prevent conflicts over water in that region.
It's pretty amazing considering the relationship between India and Pakistan hasn't always been easy.
Mhm.
It shows that cooperation is possible, even when things are tough.
It really does. It proves that diplomacy and compromise are possible, and that understanding the need for sustainable water management can bring people together.
So international agreements are key. But what about water management within a single country? What does that look like?
Well, every country needs to have clear rules and regulations to make sure their freshwater resources are being used sustainably and are protected. This means setting standards for water quality, controlling what industries can discharge into the water, and encouraging people to conserve water.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act. Trying to keep everyone happy, farmers, industries, regular people, while making sure the environment is protected.
It is. It's a big challenge, and it requires a way of thinking that takes everything into account. Understanding how water connects to energy, food,
Mhm.
our health, it's all intertwined.
I'm really starting to see how much water impacts everything. It's about creating a future where everyone can thrive, not just survive.
You got it. And it goes beyond government policies, too. Everyone has a part to play in protecting freshwater resources.
Okay, I'm all ears. What can our listeners do to make a difference?
First off, just be more aware of how much water you use. Those little things like fixing leaky faucets, taking shorter showers, choosing appliances that use less water, they all add up.
Great tips. What else?
Support businesses and organizations that are making an effort to be water wise. Choose products that are water efficient and look for companies that are investing in water conservation.
So, like putting our money where our mouth is.
Exactly. And never underestimate the power of talking about these issues. Share what you've learned with your family and friends, post about it on social media, contact your elected officials. The more people know and care about water, the more likely things are to change.
It's a good reminder that we're all in this together. Protecting our water resources is something we have to do collectively. It's everyone's responsibility.
I couldn't agree more. And this brings us back to why we started this deep dive, to learn about freshwater systems, all the cool stuff about them, and the challenges they face.
It's been an amazing journey. I've learned so much about how crucial fresh water is and how connected it is to our lives and the planet's health.
I'm so glad to hear that. I hope this conversation has given you some food for thought and maybe inspired you to take some action to make sure we all have access to clean, safe water for years to come.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today.
It was my pleasure. And remember, every single drop counts.
Great advice. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into freshwater systems. We hope you've learned something new and feel inspired to make a difference.